Today we're going to be talking about the elements of art and how they are used together to create different works of art and how they affect those works of art. Depending on what source you go to, it'll vary a little bit on what exactly the elements of art are or how many there are, but we're going to talk about these 6 for today. There's line, color, shape, forms, space, and textures. So to start off, there's line. I'm sure you know what a line is, but the official definition is a mark with greater length than width. And lines can be vertical, horizontal, diagonal, straight, curved, thick, thin, dotted, zigzag, so on and so forth. And they can also be created by other elements, so like the line between one color and another, or if you have something like a tree in your image, then each of those branches is a line with its own qualities that'll affect your image. So here we have 2 paintings that use line differently. So in the first image, does it look like the ship is moving?
No.
Okay. And that's mostly because all of the lines in the image are horizontal. The sails, the clouds, the waves, the boat itself, they're all kind of flat. And so it seems more peaceful. There's less motion to it. What about the second one? What does the boat look like it's doing?
Sinking.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of rough. So it's moving really quickly. Because the line of the mast, the rudder, the boat in the background are all diagonal, and the clouds, the waves are more varied and choppy, and there's more variation to it in general. So the first image is very orderly and flat, so it looks calm, it doesn't look like it's moving much, and the second one is a lot more varied, so it looks like there's a lot of motion. So even though that there's the same subject, basically, both of them have 2 boats on water with some clouds and waves, the way that the lines are used create a very different image. The second element is color. And color is the light reflected off of a surface that bounces back into your eye. It has different qualities. There's hue, which is red, blue, yellow, green, purple, what you traditionally think of as the color. Saturation, which is how bright or dull the color is, from a very bright, vibrant color down to gray. And value, how light or dark it is. There are primary colors, which are red, blue, and yellow. Secondary colors, which are made up of 2 different primary colors, so orange, purple, and green. And tertiary colors, which are made of mixing a primary and a secondary together, so things like red, orange, blue, green, so on and so forth. And there are different color schemes that will also affect how an image works and how the colors in the image work together. So there's complementary colors, which are colors across from each other on the color wheel. So blue and orange, red and green, and purple and yellow are the main complementary colors. Analogous colors are colors that are next to each other on the color wheel, and they'll blend and flow together very easily. And not where complementary colors will make each other stand out and clash, analogous colors will do the opposite. They'll subdue each other. So if you mix blue, blue-green, green, yellow-green, they'll all kind of flow together. Monochromatic color scheme is different values and shades of the same color. So it would all be blue, for example, but it would be different colors of blue, or different brightnesses and lightnesses of blue. So we have 2 paintings with different color schemes. So the first one is The Scream, which you've seen before.
Yeah.
And what do you notice about the colors in it?
They are complementary.
So we've got a lot of blue and orange, especially in the background area. And even things like the bridge that the figure is standing on looks kind of gray, but it's really different shades of blue and orange mixed together. So the blue and the orange make each other stand out, and because there's so many instances of them right next to each other, they sort of clash and conflict, and that's what makes the image sort of tense and anxious rather than being a serene painting of a person taking a walk on a bridge. And then in the one on the right, what do you notice about the colors?
It's all blue.
So this has except for the guitar, this has a monochromatic color scheme. So different shades of blue. And what mood does blue typically have?
Sadness.
Yeah. So blue is associated with sort of sad, somber things. And because there's no other colors to give it more action or contrast, it's very quiet and still. So that's sort of how those two color schemes affect the mood that the image has and the overall effect of it.
Sit down.
Bless you. The next element of art is shape. So shapes are 2D areas that are defined by closed edges, and they're created out of other elements in art. So if you draw a line around a shape, or if you fill in an area with a color, then you create a shape out of that area. They can be organic, which means that they have curved edges, or geometric, so all straight edges. So these are two still lifes by the same artist. One of them has more organic shapes and one of them has more geometric. So the one on the left is more what?
Geometric.
So the items in it are abstracted and drawn with a lot of sharp edges and clearly defined shapes to the point where you can't really tell what the still life was of, but you can sort of see the table and that there's objects on it. And the brighter colors, the less realistic and more abstract shapes make it more sort of lively and moving. Whereas the one on the right, which is more organic, also has softer edges and softer colors and is more realistic, so it's sort of calmer, more peaceful, less moving. And that's because it has more natural, softer shapes. So the next element is form. And form is really similar to shape, but rather than a 2D area, it's 3D objects or implied 3D objects. And this happens naturally when you're working with sculpture because you're working with 3D things, so they have a form already. Whereas if you're working in 2D, you can use value to create the illusion of depth, which gives forms. So if you add shadows and highlights to things, then they start to look like they're 3D. And the same as shape, they can be organic or geometric. So this is a similar comparison to our shape comparison. Both of these sculptures are of figures, so they're somewhat human-like, where one is highly abstracted and geometric, and the other is very organic and realistic. So you can see in the more organic, realistic one, it almost looks like the person is moving. There's the very soft, flowing fabric around them, whereas the abstract one is very clearly defined, sharp edges, and doesn't look like it's moving as much. It's more solid. And that's just, they're both the same subject. They're just using their shapes differently, or their forms differently, to create a different effect. So the next element is space, which is an area within the image. And there's two main ideas to space. There's positive versus negative space. And positive space is the space in the image that you use, that you put colors and objects and things on. And the negative space is sort of the background or the unused space. The other part of it is foreground, midground, and background, where the foreground is the closest thing to the viewer, the midground is the middle distance, and the background is the furthest away thing from the viewer. So these are two paintings that they both portray mountains that are sort of disappearing into the distance, but they each use a different aspect of space to create that distance. So in the first one, how do we know that the mountains are getting further away?
Because it's in the background.
Yeah, it's further back. We can see the less contrast in the colors. And yeah, they create that depth by having the last few mountains sort of fade away, whereas the ones in the foreground are more clearly defined, more detailed. The water, you can see there's individual waves up close, where when you go further back, it becomes more of one solid flat lake. And so that's how they create those different layers of distance. Whereas in the second one, the mountain is just as clearly defined as the foreground, but you can still tell it's further away because of the gap between the tree and house and everything in the foreground, whereas there's a sort of distance of space between that and the mountaintop that's further back. So it creates that distance between the two without having the mountain fade away into the sky. And finally, the last element is texture, which is the way something feels or the implied feeling of something. So it can be rough, smooth, furry, hard, etc. And in 2D images, you imply the texture through the use of value and color to make it look like there's shadows and different shapes and feelings there. So in this we have two paintings. The one on the left uses a more physical texture that you could actually touch and feel, where the one on the right uses implied texture. So the one on the left is painted in thick layers of paint, and you can see the shadows of the individual brush strokes. So rather than building it up in hundreds of different varied colors, you can see the texture in the trees and the fields and things like that in the shadows of the paint. Whereas in the one on the right, it's painted in very thin layers of paint, but because they use so many different colors over and over on top of each other, you create the look of actual hair, skin, lips, eyes, and so it's very photorealistic, and it looks like it would feel like just like the real thing, but is actually flat. And so that's just sort of the way that both of those can be used to create something. So, to review, the elements of art are all of the different pieces and objects and everything that makes up a work of art. And the way that they're used affects the mood, the feeling, the final appearance of any work of art.